Hello everyone and welcome to the Premiere Pro, where you'll learn everything you need to know to go from a 100% beginner to a professional level video editor. We'll release at least one new tutorial every week, and if there's anything you'd like to see covered in the future, let me know in the comments. In Volume 10, I showed you how to export your video. If you want to take a look at that video, there's a link in the description. Right now, I'm going to show you how to adjust the color in your edit. So let's get started. So I have a few clips I've pulled to the timeline here. In the first series, Beginning Video Editor, we show you how to select and trim those clips. So take a look at that playlist if you'd like to learn more about that. So basically, I'm just going to teach you the very basics of adjusting color. This isn't color grading. This is very basic color correction. You just want to make sure everything's in what we call legal levels and normal parameters, where the colors aren't too far tinted one side to the other, and where the brightness is correct, the black levels and the dark levels and the shadows are correct. So what we're going to do here, and one thing I like to do, this isn't checked, but make sure it's not checked on selection follows playhead. Because what'll happen is you're trying to go through clips, it'll start automatically selecting and it'll kind of screw up what you're doing when you're trying to color grade. So what we're going to do is we need to first get our color grading tools available. Now, this window, this is your kind of Bible here with anything that you need to see. If you don't see it, you'll see it here and you can select it so that you can open that window. So in Premiere, there's a pretty powerful color corrector. There's other more basic ones, but this is the Lumetri color right here. If you open this, you'll now have your panel for all your color correction. But what's also important as well is you want your scopes. And that is going to be where you get the actual data information of how bright and how dark everything is. Now, as you can see, this kind of just threw these in here in my workspace, right? Doesn't look too good. So what I like to do, once you arrange a workspace the way you like it, you can go to Workspaces and you can hit Save as New Workspace and you can name it. So that's very simple. So I'm going to just get rid of these here because I actually have one that I've already saved. I want to keep my editing workspace the way it normally is. So this is a great way to jump between functions and not have to readjust every time. So now if I go to Workspaces here, I have one for color grading. And this is already set up just for this. So I don't need to see as much of my timeline here. I just need to see that the clip is there. So I can even move this down a little bit more, because what you really want is as much visual input as you can get for your scopes, because this is what you're actually looking at as far as information. And these can look very intimidating, but they're pretty easy to understand, at least as far as it goes for baseline color correcting. Grading gets a little more complicated, but baseline color, these scopes are not hard to read. So this would be a vector scope, and this would be a waveform monitor. And these are what broadcasters use to make sure, again, what we call within legal levels, to make sure that the colors are properly represented, because our eyes, we can't trust our eyes to know mathematically what is right, what's overexposed, what's correct. So we need to look at the actual raw information. And that's what these instruments are designed to do. Now, depending on if you've ever opened this before, you may have different scopes that appear. If you need to change anything, you can go here and it's going to allow you to bring up different types of scopes, take them away, and you can even choose the type. Generally for broadcast, legal levels, you want for the waveform monitor, which is what this is, you want YC no chroma. Some of this gets into some more advanced color correcting, but that's not what we're looking at right now. So we're looking at this just for luminance levels. So this waveform is luminance. It's telling us how much light is coming through if it's clipped, which is over 100, where our skin tone is for our subject, and then where our black levels are. So at a very base level, so we have this clip selected here. So if you look now at this clip, you can see how it's moving when I move, because this is basically giving you a mathematical representation of what's happening in the shot from a color and a luminance standpoint. And you can see here on my vector scope as well. So what the vector scope does is this really just tells us two things. where is the color tinted and how saturated it is. So to very quickly show you, and I'm just going to go to extreme to give you the example. This is the color temperature. So you can go more towards warm. And as you see that shot getting warmer, you see how this goes more toward the red and the yellow, because that is a warmer tint. It's tinted more towards the orange warm scale. If we do the exact opposite, go to the cooler end, you can see the shot's getting much cooler, much bluer. And look at that. We're going more towards the blue and the cyan part of the scale. So 0 is going to be neutral. You can type those in as well. If you don't have a typo, and hit 10. Now, what you really want is you want to focus this as much as possible towards the center. Now, when there's variance in the shot, you're always going to get a little like bleeding outside of that. But if we're looking our core, most brightest level in the middle, that's what you want to be white, and you want it to be right in the middle. So this shot is pretty well color balanced. It has natural blues and warm tones. I'd probably actually move it just slightly over to the blue just to make it a little less warm. So I'm thinking about that as pretty good. So that shot is definitely color balanced now. Now we want to look at our luminance levels. So again, if I move this, you can see that. So where you want to be as far as luminance is you want your subject, their skin tone, to be at this level, 70 IRE. So this scale is called IRE scale. It goes from 0 to 100. In this sense, there's this other side here, but again, we're not going to get into this too much. This is just very basic color correcting. So this is our black level. So if you see blacks and you move here, that black level is going to change. And if you look at the screen, you look at the shot, you can see that that black level is changing. So a lot of people, it's easy for people to say brightness, but what is black level? It's basically how saturated your blacks are, which translates to our eyes as, does the black look really washed out? Or does it look really what we call crushed? It's too much, right? You actually lose information. So we usually just want a nice balance. And in broadcast, the standard is 2.5 IRE, which is just above this line here. So we'd want to move this down. And as you can see here, there's little pieces of it that are moving, but most of it isn't moving. And that usually happens when your shadows are too high. So we can also move the shadows down a little bit. Kind of get all of that a little closer. And now we can move this down again. And we're going to look at just that main part. This little part that's touching is okay. But this main section here, you want that at about 2.5-ish. So you really want this just above the line. So like kind of these here that we're looking at, I want that just above the line. And if you look at our shot now, it looks pretty pleasant. It doesn't look washed out, but it doesn't look crushed. Now, it can be very hard to find the subject. You have to get used to looking at this, and you will get better at this. But what I like to do is I just move it around, and you can see her head moving. So again, this is literally roughly the shape. This is our subject here. And if you look, this spike here is going up to 80. So that's technically a little bit too bright. We want that to be at 70. You can go as high as 75, but generally you want to do about 70. And again, you can't go by your eyes because a monitor you're on could look a little bit dark. And you can go, oh, that looks really dark. Maybe I should move it up a little bit, right? But the thing is, then when you get it on a monitor that's properly calibrated, you may see, oh, now that's way too bright. So you really always need to go by the mathematical information. It's very important. And this really starts on set. If you're shooting, you should be metering your shots and making sure you're falling within these levels. And this will make your job or your editor's job much easier. You always want to really get it as good as you can in camera. And these really should be just fine-tuned adjustments. So again, if you're ever having trouble seeing what's going on, just make sure you move the playhead around. As you see your subject move and you see the coinciding motion here, you're going to know, okay, well, that's our subject. And you want to look for the hottest peak. Like that's where it goes the highest. You don't want to look at a low point and adjust based on that. You want to look at the highest it's going to be to correct it. That looks like about it right there. So we want to get this down to here. And that's going to be our white level. We're going to get the white level right down to there. You see that? How it's right at 70 for the peak. And that's where we want to be. So now we look at our shot that's properly exposed. And you have to be careful. I technically should have shown you the whites first because that does affect our black levels. So we might need to move this up a little bit. That's actually looking pretty good. And then the last thing you want to look at for basic color adjustment would be saturation. So that's how saturated the colors are. Now this one, there isn't a hard and fast rule. This is really what's aesthetically pleasing and what mood you're going for. So this shot is at neutral, so I'm not adding or taking anything away. If I start to take it away, see how it gets a little bit more of a colder, desolate feel to it. If I do this, it feels a lot warmer, brighter. Now, you have to look at what you're using this for. If you're just doing like an instructional video or something that's very like academic, you're not trying to go crazy. You're not trying to be Martin Scorsese here and set a mood. You're just trying to get the information across. So that's a very important thing to think about too with color is what story are you telling? Maybe this is about someone who's in distress. In that case, you might want to pull back on the saturation a little bit because that's just going to show like an emptiness. Maybe this is someone who's getting good news, although she doesn't really look like it. But in theory, if that was the case, you may want to warm it up a little bit. So, or maybe it's just an important or an emotional piece or something like that, and you just want it to feel a little bit more warm and inviting. So as you can see, as I slide up or down, that grows and shrinks. Now you can go all the way down and we have black and white, and that can be its own effect too. You can oversaturate for artistic reasons. So really, again, there's no right or wrong in this. This is just what you are going for. So if I have no specific reason to bring this up or down, I just leave it neutral. Because remember, because these are all here doesn't mean you have to use every single one of them. So you need to use this as needed. I didn't go over this because this looks pretty good, but the magenta and the green are the other opposite adjustments you can make with tint. These are usually the ones that can get you in trouble. So unless it really needs it, I would just keep that at 0. But if you have a shot that's looking a little too pink or purple or a little too green, you can offset it by using the opposite color on here. I can fix that a little bit. So quickly, we'll just look at another clip here. Same thing. So whatever clip is highlighted is what I'm seeing now. I have this highlighted on the playhead and it's highlighted. I'm using that. Put the playhead here and let's just see. It caught me again. Selection follows playhead. So I'm going to uncheck that. Because what can happen is you move the playhead a little and you think you're correcting one clip and you actually correct the other, and you can really get in trouble to where you can't get out of it. So now that we've done that, so this one you can see this is spreading out a little more. So this is definitely a little bit more saturated. Now I may not want this much saturation, right? Again, depending on what it is, but let's just say I want this to be a little less saturated. We're just going to drag this down. And it's just a little more subtle. It was maybe a little in your face with the saturation before. Now this is interesting. I haven't looked at this on the scope yet. And I was talking about getting things right on set. This one, my black levels are already right where I need them. So I don't even need to touch that. If I move around here, we have our subjects and we have a subject in the background that we see kind of moving up around here, right? Now, this is a good point too. In a situation where we have background subjects, we don't want to ignore them if they're completely clipped. Clipping is over 100 where you've lost all your information, but you don't want to color grade your background actor at the expense of your foreground because they're not really the subject of the video. So if you really look at our foreground here, we're at about here, which is not bad, but I'd like to bring it down just a little to get it to 70. And now that's a pretty good looking shot, right? It's pretty well exposed. It's not that different from the original, but to me, this looks a little cleaner and just a little bit more professional. And we have one more shot here. We do the same thing. Now this one. So if we look here, and again, this can be a little tricky, but our peaks for our subject skin tone is right about here. So we're going to bring that down just a little bit, get it to about 70. Blacks actually look a little bit crushed. So we're going to want to bring that up a little bit. And that one's sometimes it gets very sensitive. So if this slider is making it too difficult, you can also manually type in, and let's try like 0.6. So that to me looks perfect. So once you know these basic principles, we very quickly were able to adjust and get these shots looking really good. And these are 3 well-adjusted shots that when you finalize your videos, this is a step you're going to want to take. You want to make sure all your shots are at least within legal levels. Even if you don't stylistically grade them, make sure they're in legal levels. And then in the future videos, we'll go over audio. You want to make sure your audio is mixed. Those are the things that are called like mastering and mixing your video. You want to make sure these things are in their prime state that are ready to present. You don't want, for instance, if the exposure was really too high, you don't want to show that to a client, right? That doesn't look right. You want things looking their sharpest and their cleanest, and how they may air on television or air on a web stream or air anywhere really that people are going to watch video. People watch video everywhere these days, maybe on a website. And because videos can end in different places, you want to make sure that you have it in these legal levels, because maybe it looks okay on a computer screen, but you may put it on an actual television. It may look really bad, or may not look as good on a phone, or may look better on the web than it does in your living room. So that's what these levels do. You're within those levels. You're making sure you're going to look good on all devices. So that's really it. Now you know how to adjust color in Premiere. In Volume 12, I'll show you how to sync separately recorded audio and video. For more Premiere Pro tutorials, click the like button, click the subscribe button, and make sure to ring the notification bell. And as soon as the next volume is uploaded, you'll find the link in the description.